You walk into Coles or Woolies for a quick shop, maybe to grab milk, bananas, some toothpaste, and you tell yourself, no snacks today. But then you end up in aisle 7, staring down a wall of temptation. Red Rock Deli with its sleek packaging, Smith's chips in flavors you didn't know existed, Doritos that come in every shade of neon, Twisties, Cheetos, Tubes, Grainwaves, Burger Rings. The gang's all here. And on the surface, it looks like you've got choices, like there's a flavor for every mood, a brand for every personality, a snack for every situation. But here's the plot twist. Almost all of them are owned by the same company. Meet PepsiCo. Yes, the same company that makes Pepsi, Mountain Dew, and Gatorade is also the undisputed king of Australia's snack aisle. While you were busy choosing between the healthier Grainwaves and the classic Aussie Smiths, PepsiCo was sitting quietly in the background, raking it in from both ends, with a system structured in a way you never even notice. If it's salty, crunchy, comes in a shiny bag, and stares you down from a Woolies shelf, there's a very strong chance it's one of theirs. From party-sized bags to baked, not fried lunchbox snacks, they've got a brand for every craving and a disguise for every marketing angle. What looks like a thriving battlefield of brands is, in reality, one giant player staging an internal performance. It's a brand theater, a costume party where every mask is worn by the same company. And the trick is, most people never put it all together. The average shopper doesn't walk into the chip aisle thinking, which PepsiCo brand will I buy today? Instead, they think they're making independent decisions based on taste, packaging, price, or mood. But that choice is an illusion. Whether it looks healthy or deep fried, budget or premium, playful or classy, it's all coming from the same place. You're not picking between competitors, you're picking between flavors in one company's portfolio dressed up to look like a rivalry. It's a system designed not just to dominate shelf space, but to neutralize any real competition by flooding the category. When a competitor releases something new, PepsiCo doesn't need to play catch-up. They already have a product in every lane. Bold, healthy looking, kid-friendly, budget, premium, you name it. And if they don't, they'll roll one out fast. That's the power of owning the aisle. What looks like variety is really saturation, carefully mapped out to block competitors before they even get a chance. What makes it so effective is how normal it all feels. You don't question how often PepsiCo brands show up because they've made it feel completely natural. The colors, the packaging, and the tone are all designed to seem like its own thing. And that's exactly the point. You bounce from one snack to another, thinking you're switching it up, when really, you're staying right where they want you. It doesn't feel like anyone's pulling the strings. It feels like a normal shopping trip. But in reality, you're moving through a carefully designed system, quiet, polished, and built to keep you coming back. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Because on top of owning all your favorite snacks, PepsiCo also helps decide where those snacks go and which others quietly vanish before you ever notice them. This happens through something called category management. If you've ever wondered why certain brands seem to always get prime real estate while others are stuck down near the floor, this is the reason. Category management is when big suppliers like PepsiCo form partnerships with major supermarkets to help manage an entire product category. So instead of just selling chips, they're also helping organize the whole salty snack section. They bring in sales data, consumer research, trend forecasts, and layout plans. While on paper, it's all about efficiency through optimizing shelf space, boosting category performance, and making things easier for shoppers, underneath all that is a system that gives enormous power to the biggest player in the aisle. Because when the company with the most products is also the one helping decide how the whole category is arranged, it doesn't take long for things to tilt in their favor. They're in the room when decisions are made about everyone's shelf space. What goes where, how much of it, which products get the prime end of aisle spots, and which ones quietly disappear. Officially, it's all just recommendations, but in practice, those recommendations tend to stick. And over time, they start to feel a lot less like advice and a lot more like policy. With PepsiCo involved in shaping the layout, it's no surprise their own products consistently end up in the best possible positions. Think about it. If you're Coles or Woolies and your biggest snack supplier hands you detailed analytics showing that a new flavor of Doritos will outsell a niche competitor by 20%, why wouldn't you take their advice? It's low risk and high reward. But that data is coming from PepsiCo's own internal ecosystem. They're basically grading their own homework, and they're very good at making the numbers look clean. Meanwhile, smaller brands start to fade into the background. They lose visibility, get less stock, and miss out on reorders. Eventually, they disappear altogether, often without anyone noticing. Eventually, your options narrow until the only ones left are the ones PepsiCo wanted you to see in the first place. The worst part is that there's nothing illegal about it. Supermarkets rely on these partnerships to keep things organized and profitable. But when the largest supplier is also guiding the strategy, real competition quietly fades and disappears. Sometimes, all it takes is one spreadsheet, one quarterly review, and the entire aisle shifts to match what works best for the company supplying the data. Now, imagine you're a small Aussie chip brand. Maybe your product is healthier. Maybe it's made locally with real ingredients, no artificial additives, and flavors that actually taste like what they say on the packet. You've built a bit of a buzz on social media, people are loving it at markets and independent grocers, and you finally get a breakthrough. Coles or Woolies agrees to trial your product. You get one flavor in a few locations, tucked on the bottom shelf with limited stock, no in-store signage, and no promo pricing to help you stand out. It's far from ideal, but you've made it in. And for a small brand, that alone feels like a step forward. But what you don't see is what's waiting behind the scenes. PepsiCo rolls in for their quarterly category review. They present pages of sales figures, shelf performance metrics, customer flow data, and a few friendly suggestions. Their data suggests that the shelf space your product's taking up could be more profitable with something else. Maybe a new flavor of Doritos, an extension of the Red Rock Deli range, or a family-sized pack of Twisties. On paper, the logic makes perfect sense. The numbers are tidy, the projections look solid, and from the supermarket's perspective, swapping it out seems like the smart move. And just like that, you're out. Not because your chips weren't selling and not because people didn't like them, but because someone else had the leverage to say that the shelf space could be more profitable with something else. Your product is quietly pulled, and the next time a loyal customer goes looking for it, it's gone. Most won't even question it. It just simply fades from memory. Another snack that briefly appeared and then disappeared without a trace. Shelf space is tight, and shopper attention is even tighter. Without the budget for promos, banner ads, end-of-aisle displays, or multi-buy deals, smaller brands are left crossing their fingers that someone notices them buried on the bottom shelf. But most shoppers don't look down. They're drawn to the specials, the signage, the bright colors, and eye-level products that stand out immediately. And those prime spots are almost always occupied by giants like PepsiCo. Here's what really locks it in. PepsiCo's dominance on the shelf is what keeps driving future success. When their products take up more space, they naturally get more visibility, which leads to higher sales. Those higher sales generate convincing data, and that data is then used to argue for even more space next time the layout gets reviewed. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle where strong performance is both the reason and the results of controlling the aisle. For smaller brands, this creates a wall that's nearly impossible to climb. Even if a new product starts to gain traction, it's still being compared to giants with national exposure, constant promotions, and far more shelf presence. The game isn't rigged at the register, it's rigged before the shopper even walks in. And because the system keeps rewarding the top players, it's almost invisible to anyone outside the loop. PepsiCo's influence doesn't stop at the supermarket shelf. Step beyond the aisle and you'll find them operating in a different kind of space, one where decisions are made behind closed doors in policy meetings and government consultations. Because while they shape what you see in stores, they're also working hard to shape what regulators are allowed to do. In Australia, PepsiCo is one of the most active players in the food industry's lobbying machine. When the government even hints at introducing things like sugar taxes, mandatory health warnings, or restrictions on junk food marketing, especially to kids, they don't stay quiet and let the chips fall where they may. Instead, they show up armed with carefully worded submissions, well-funded industry reps, and talking points designed to sound reasonable. They argue that regulation would limit consumer choice, hurt small businesses, or unfairly penalize families doing their weekly shop. They lean heavily on economic talking points, promote the idea of personal responsibility, and push for industry-led solutions that look like progress but rarely lead to real change. They don't position themselves as defenders of junk food. Instead, they frame the issue as one of awareness, insisting that education campaigns are the better path and that government intervention would be overreach. And they rarely act alone. Often, PepsiCo works through industry bodies like the Australian Food and Grocery Council. While on the surface, these groups represent the collective interests of manufacturers, in practice, they function as buffers that allow major players like PepsiCo to push for policy outcomes without always attaching their name to the push. It gives their lobbying a layer of distance, a way to argue from the shadows while sounding like a neutral stakeholder. But when you follow the funding, the talking points, and the policy positions, the pattern is clear. What's good for PepsiCo becomes the default stance of the food industry as a whole. It's a strategy they've refined globally. In Mexico, for instance, they campaigned aggressively against front-of-pack warning labels, claiming the new system would confuse consumers and damage brand trust. In Chile, they opposed legislation that banned cartoon characters on junk food packaging, arguing that it unfairly targeted certain brands and hurt marketing innovation. In the UK, they pushed back against advertising restrictions during children's TV hours, saying it would impact media revenue more than it would change diets. And in the US, they've spent years fighting soda taxes and local food labeling initiatives, pouring money into state-level campaigns that frame public health laws as overreach. The tactics change depending on the country, but the core message stays the same. Voluntary guidelines are better than government rules, individual responsibility is more important than structural change, and any regulation that hurts sales is a step too far. These arguments sound familiar because they are. They're pulled straight from the tobacco playbook: delay, distract, discredit, and deflect. In Australia, this means we still have a voluntary health star rating system that lets companies pick and choose when to use it. It means there's no legal limit on how much junk food can be advertised to children, especially online or through packaging. It means there are still no clear mandatory front-of-pack warning labels like the ones that helped reduce obesity rates in other countries. And it means companies like PepsiCo can keep presenting themselves as partners in public health while working to quietly block every meaningful reform behind the scenes. Their goal isn't to argue with science, it's to delay the moment that science turns into law. Because the longer they can push back the rules, the longer the system stays the same, and the longer they keep their grip on what you eat, what you see, and what never gets labeled clearly in the first place. One of the most controversial parts of PepsiCo's strategy is their marketing to children. Officially, they say they don't advertise junk food to kids under 12, but in practice, they do, just not in the traditional way. Instead of relying on traditional TV ads during cartoons, they turn to supermarket displays placed right at kid level. They roll out colorful packaging, cartoon mascots, limited edition packs, and QR codes that link to games or challenges. Bright colors, playful fonts, and social media hooks are all designed to grab attention and spread quickly through schoolyards and friend groups. It's marketing that blends in, feels fun, and slips under the radar, but it's incredibly effective. A 2023 study found that most snacks with child-targeted packaging were high in salt, sugar, or fat, and most came from a handful of major companies, including PepsiCo. When a kid knows what a Twisties pack looks like before they can read a nutrition label, that's not just brand recognition, but behavioral programming. Australia just hasn't pushed back as hard as other countries when it comes to junk food regulation, and companies like PepsiCo have taken full advantage. Front-of-pack labeling remains voluntary, the health star rating system is often more confusing than helpful, and advertising rules, especially when it comes to children, are filled with grey areas. It's a system that quietly flavors the brands with the most resources and reach. But things are starting to shift. Researchers, health scientists, and consumer groups are turning up the volume. More reports are landing in the headlines, more people are connecting the dots, and the narrative is changing. What once looked like a grocery store full of options now feels more like a curated illusion, one where the biggest brands aren't just competing, but are also directing the entire experience. The illusion of choice is starting to wear thin, and for the first time in a long time, people are beginning to see who's actually in control. This doesn't mean we need to cancel chips or start panic buying from local brands, but it does mean that we need to rethink how power works in the food system. Because when one company can dominate a category, manage its layout, fund its promotions, shape its pricing, and lobby to keep it all going, that's not competition, that's corporate control. We need real transparency in how category management works and how decisions are made in the supermarket aisle. There should be clear separation between supplier advice and how stores decide what products go where. Advertising rules need to be tightened, especially when it comes to anything aimed at children. Labels on the front of packaging should be mandatory and easy to understand, not something that requires effort to interpret. And if smaller brands are ever going to stand a chance, they need real support with access to shelf space, visibility, and promotional opportunities that aren't reserved for industry giants. So, the next time you're standing in front of a wall of chips at the grocery store, take a moment to think about how it got there. That shelf wasn't arranged to make your life easier, it was carefully planned to steer your choices. Every placement, every promotion, every product is the result of deals made behind the scenes. What looks like 10 different brands might actually be one company guiding your decision from start to finish. It's not just about snacks or convenience, it's about influence. What feels like choice is often something else entirely. It's strategy, and at its core, it's lobbying. But what do you think? Did you know that PepsiCo owns most of your favorite snacks? Do you think it's fair for PepsiCo to have input on how products are arranged at supermarkets? Are there other companies that do something similar? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below and let's discuss. And if you enjoyed this story, give us a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell so you never miss out on more deep dives like this. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, stay curious.